Hello students, welcome to the Analyst. Today is 10th of July 2023 and we look at all the important articles from the Indian Express and the Hindu. I am Ashish and let's start with the quote of the day. So, Yato Dharma Tatos Jaya. So this is basically the motto of our Supreme Court. And what it means, so basically where there is dharma, there is victory. And by dharma, we mean rule of law. And we also understand that rule of law is fundamental to our democratic institutions. Now, let's look at the table of contents. So first article that we'll be discussing is regarding extreme climate events. And we have to look at this in perspective of the incessant rains that is going on in the northern parts of India, in the northern plains and the Himalayan ecology in general. Then we look at the Namami Gange project. Why this is in news? Because turtles are being used to basically depollute the river Ganga. Then we look at nutritional security. Why this is in news? Because Punjab Agriculture University has basically developed a new type of wheat, and we have to also look at the perspective that the same university was the fulcrum of our green revolution. So they have created a new variety of wheat which will basically target obesity and sugar, basically diabetes type 2. Then we look at deforestation of tropical forest, primary forest, old growth forest, and basically here we look at two case studies, one of the Amazon rainforest, the other of the Congo rainforest. Finally, we look at the reasons behind an all-time low NPA in Indian financial system, Indian banking system. Now, let's look at the first article. So we have all seen the videos of entire bridges going collapsed. We have seen that the roads are inundated. We are looking at continuous rainfall in the last weekend when we saw in Himachal Pradesh, in Jammu, in Delhi itself. So continuous incessant rains. Now, before we go ahead, we have to look at why these rains are happening at this point of time. Then we'll go to the macro issue of extreme climate events. So what happens is that this is the region of Mediterranean. So from Mediterranean, temperate cyclones come to India, and this happens during winters. And these temperate cyclones are basically low pressure systems. So they are coming to India and they are basically colliding with the Himalayas. Now they are coming with the help of STWJ that we discussed in our monsoon discussion. So subtropical westerly jet stream. They bring this to the Indian subcontinent. Now what happens is that this is a winter phenomena. Right now what is happening that the western disturbances is still continuing. So western disturbances were late, then it continued also in summers, and now it is continuing also in the winters. So please appreciate that this is a very complex system in itself. So this is western disturbance. Then we also know that this is the time of monsoon, and we have looked at monsoon. So winds from mascarene high pressure would come towards the Indian subcontinent, and so it will bring a lot of rain. Why? Because they are coming from seas. Now what is happening is that these two systems have basically collided, and therefore rain from two different regions during the monsoon season. So that is a very good example of the changing nature of climate, the changing patterns, the increasing intensity of hazards. And basically, when we are calling climate weather events, what are we seeing? We are seeing that we are not able to predict, we are not able to foresee what will happen next. Now, is this a pattern only reflecting in India? No. So we are looking at, let's say, wildfires in US, in California. Then we are looking at heat waves, not only in Asia, but across the globe. Then we are looking at intensifying cyclones. And are we not looking at the tropical cyclones becoming more frequent in the Arabian Sea region? What happened to be the Bay of Bengal? The core area of our tropical cyclones was Bay of Bengal. Now they are moving towards the Arabian Sea and they are becoming more intense. Why this is happening? This is because these extreme climate events are triggered by climate change itself, right? Then we are also looking at the changing patterns of monsoon. Now, let's appreciate that the entire South Asia is agrarian in nature. And if there is change in the monsoon patterns, will it affect the agrarian economy? And if it affects the economy, the agrarian economy, will it affect our national goals, our larger national goals? Why? Because more than 50% of India till this point is dependent on the agrarian economy. Also, we must appreciate that almost 70% of India lives in the rural hinterland. So, according to census 2010, we have seen that 68% of India is living in rural India, right? So, the rural economy, the agrarian economy, all will be affected by this changing weather patterns, right? Now, let's look at some data from 2022. So, this data tells us that heavy rains, floods, and landslides were seen for 214 days. So, 214 days out of 365 days, you are looking at heavy rains, floods, and landslides. And why this is abnormal is, let's look at this bell curve. So, ideally, what should happen is that you should have a monsoon peak, a rain peak. So, India gets more than 100 centimeters of rain. But this 100 centimeters of rain doesn't happen the entire year. It is not spread across the year. It is concentrated on 3 to 4 odd monsoon months. But now what we are seeing, that events which are triggered by water, so heavy rain triggered by water, floods, landslides, they are mostly triggered by water. So they are becoming more frequent and they are now more widespread temporarily, right? Now let's look at the graph and let's try to draw some conclusions. So what do we see? That this entire region, the monsoon period and the summer season, this is where majority of our hazards occur. And what kind of hazards are we talking about? So red signifies heat waves. So this is pre-monsoon. So first you will have Lu, okay? So it will create heat waves. Then later on you will start with lightning and storms, and finally heavy rains. So in summers, you are having heat waves, which can lead to heat strokes. Then you are starting for pre-monsoon showers with lightning, thunderstorms, etc. And finally, you are looking at floods, you are looking at landslides, you are looking at incessant rains, continuous rains. So that is the pattern. Now, what are the causes? So the causes, whenever we look at such ecological issues, we can classify them into two parts. One is anthropogenic, natural. Now, natural causes can be because of the sunspot cycle, can be because of the Milankovitch cycle. It can be because of the elliptical orbit. It can be because of the changing distance between the sun and the earth, right? So all those are natural factors. Then you have plate tectonics, you have volcanism. So all these factors will be coming in. But right now, what majority of the reports are telling us, what IPCC AR6 is telling us, is that majority of the extreme climate events that we are looking at are because of anthropogenic reasons. And what do you mean by anthropogenic? That is human caused factors. Now, first factor is emissions. So are we not driving diesel guzzling cars? And are we not celebrating it by making songs on it, right? So while we are moving towards EV, are we still not driving the diesel oriented trucks, cars, etc.? So emissions will be there, right? Then can we shut down our thermal power plants? Can we shut down our coal mines? Naturally not, right? Because we are moving towards a smooth energy transition. We do not want any shocks. So I cannot stop driving my diesel vehicle and suddenly buy an electric vehicle. There has to be a smoother transition, right? So emissions are here to continue, and just think, pause for a while and think about it. That while the West has already developed, India needs its space and time to develop. Second of all, that what happens after India develops? Will Africa not ask for its fair share of emissions? For its fair share of producing carbon dioxide, to say so, right? So can we completely stop emissions? The answer is no. But can we go for smoother transitions, energy transitions, going for more greener and cleaner solutions, right? That is the way forward. Then mining. So there comes your coal power plant. Then to move towards EV itself, we have to mine cobalt, we have to go for rare earth minerals, we have to go for critical minerals, right? Then drilling. So if strategically speaking, we want to make a tunnel, let's say we are making the Atal tunnel to cross the Pir Panjal range and to reach Lahul and Spiti valley of Himachal Pradesh. Why do we want to do it? Because I want to directly travel from Lahul and Spiti to Leh. So that gives India an alternate path to Leh Ladakh, except apart from the Jammu-Uddhampur highway, right? So do we drill the mountain? Yes, we are tunneling it naturally. So when we are tunneling it, will it create some vibrations? Yes, they will create some vibrations. Then if I'm driving a car, if I'm driving a truck, will it create a smaller vibration? Yes. Then let's say I'm also mining in the Himalayan region. So will it create some vibrations? Yes. Now what happens is, at some point of time, these three vibrations can come in phase. To say so in phase, that means their peaks can coincide. And if their peaks coincide, then the resultant becomes a very big wave. And is it safe to say or assume that a bigger vibration wave can trigger some hazard like landslide? Naturally. Now, let's try to imagine a solution, a situation. So let's say these are the Himalayas, and here what happens is an event called cloudburst. So incessant rains for a very short period of time in a very small area. So it triggers what? It triggers cloudburst. Now what happens after cloudburst? So the entire area, this area gets flash floods. Now what happens with flash floods? So inundation of a lot of buildings, breaking up of a lot of infrastructure, and all that rubble will move downstream. And can it basically break open a barrage that has been built? So a cloudburst event can lead to a flash flood, which can lead to the destruction of a barrage or a dam. So what is this? This is basically cascading disasters or cascading hazards. And can I say this entire system will also affect the downstream? How come? So all the rubble will finally move to where? It will move to the northern plains, because whatever is happening in, let's say, Himachal Pradesh or Uttarakhand, what will happen to the rubble? So rubble will gradually move downwards to the lower riparian regions. And what will happen to the biodiversity there? Will it affect the base level of the river? Okay. Will it affect the flow of the river in downstream? So what happens in Himachal doesn't stay in Himachal. It can very well affect what is happening in Allahabad or in Banaras, right? So these are connected systems that we must appreciate. Then we have construction activity. Good examples you can take. The Atal tunnel, you can take the Char Dham Yatra. Naturally, you have to go for infrastructure development to border areas. So massive tunneling operations are being taken up, and all-weather roads are being made up. Now, we must at this point also appreciate that nature has a bigger might. So while we created these all-weather roads, they were inundated and some were completely broken during these incessant rains itself. Then are we looking at land use pattern changing? So more urbanization. So rather than green spaces, we are destroying green spaces and we are creating urban jungles. So rather than jungle, we have urban jungle. So changing land use patterns. And if we change land use patterns, what happens? It affects the natural flow system. And what is a natural flow system? So let's assume wind or water wanted to flow in this direction. Okay. Now let's say I created a small city. So what will happen? This water will change its path. It will change its path naturally. Let's say the river was flowing like this. I make a barrage and I bifurcate the water towards canals. So what happens? Again, we are playing with the natural flow systems, and let's say winds are coming from this direction, okay, and I am a basically skyscraper. So what happens? I'm basically stopping the wind flow. So constantly on land, on air, on soil, everywhere, are we not playing with the natural flow systems? And that is why we have even destructive impacts of these hazards. Now, these are the examples that we can list, that lightning is there, thunderstorms, dust storms, hailstorms, heavy rainfalls, heat waves, cold waves, cloud burst, cyclones. We are looking at all these events multiple times in news. So these individual topics themselves become important, and which will be part of the later discussions. Now, what is the way forward? Let us appreciate the way forward, and this kind of content you can use in your answers whenever you are writing, you're balancing development and ecology. Because somewhere down the line, we have to move towards sustainable development or sustainability. Now, first is appreciating carrying capacity. So, let's say nature has its own limits. Nature has set its own limits. So, over the period of time, what are we doing? So, let's say this was the carrying capacity of Himalaya. Himalaya carrying capacity. What is carrying capacity? So, let's say a particular hill can only support, let's say, 10 people living there. So, that is its carrying capacity. So, this is the Himalayan carrying capacity. Now, what has happened? Have we degraded Himalayas over the period of time? Yes. So, can I say the carrying capacity has also fallen? Simultaneously, can I also say that the demand from such ecosystem has also increased? We want more out of Himalayas. We want more water, we want more tourism, we want volume tourism. We want to go to exotic places. We want to go to places which are unexplored, which were not yet seen, to Baralachala, right? So when we are going to passes with diesel guzzling cars, what are we doing? We are also affecting the ecology. So while the carrying capacity has decreased, the demand from humans has increased, and there is no sign that the demand from humans will decrease. So what happens? There are some effects in form of hazards. So we must appreciate carrying capacity of individual ecosystems. Furthermore, we have to look at the ecosystem approach. So ecosystem is a complex reality, right? And it is made up of parts. And let's say it has 4 wheels. So let's say I affect one wheel of this ecosystem named car. Okay, so what will happen? It will not have the usual motion. And what will happen? It will rebalance. It will rebalance itself in the form of homeostasis, and a new equilibrium will be achieved. And this tells us that whenever we are dealing with ecosystems, we must appreciate the precautionary principle. That unless and until we know the impact of a human action, we should not take that action against the ecosystem, against the nature. Then we have to go for afforestation. This we discussed in detail when we were taking up the Miyawaki method, more particularly in urban areas to develop urban jungles. Then rejuvenation of natural flow systems. So if I have played with a river and I have bifurcated the river, earlier the river used to have its recharge systems in form of lakes, ponds. What we have done? We have removed all of them. Now what do we need to do right now? We can rejuvenate some of these lakes, ponds, some of the natural flow of the rivers, and that is why we'll see in the Namami Gange project, we talk about the ecological flow or the aviral flow, so that the biodiversity is able to survive, the quality of water is good for the ecosystem to rejuvenate. Then we have to move towards proactive and preventive disaster management. So rather than reactionary disaster management, where we are basically involving ourselves in rescue operations, we have to go for climate resilient and proactive models of disaster management. And we need to develop this infrastructure and agriculture in a resilient manner, which can suit the vagaries of nature, demands of today, given that these are extreme climate events. So if there are seeds which are failing due to changing nature of Indian monsoon, then we need to have more drought tolerant, or let's say rain tolerant species. So we need to have more tolerant species of seeds also. Then we must appreciate the ancient and traditional knowledge systems, what our nanas and dadas used to tell us. So how to conserve water, how to conserve resources, and how not to be wasteful, and how to go for the reuse, recycling. So the idea of circular economy, right? That is our ancient wisdom. Also, you must also have seen that there are traditional water harvesting methods. So we must appreciate what our elders have already taught us about a particular area. So Leh, Ladakh will save water in a different way of how Rajasthan does it. So depending upon region, depending upon situation, depending upon the current situations, we have to mix both the modern as well as our traditional methods. Now, let's look at the second article. So basically, in Varanasi, turtles help clean the Ganga. That begs the question, what is the Namami Gange project or Clean Ganga project, right? Now, this is the entire river system of Ganga, and we can see one simple point that we can draw, that it is an entire region that is being affected. So let's say I have lots of pollution coming from this stream. Then immaterial of what happens in Banas, Chambal, Betwa, my Ganga will be polluted. So if Yamuna is polluted, Ganga will be polluted. That means again we have to appreciate the ecosystems approach. We have to, if we want to clean Ganga, then the wisdom is that we have to clean the entire Gangetic river system, all its tributaries and distributaries, right? Now, what is the significance of Ganga? So basically, can we say that it is of high cultural and spiritual significance? It has multiple spiritual cities on the banks of Ganga. Then can I say 40% of India's total population lives in Ganga? Further, can I also say that it is part of India's civilizational history? It is part of the Indic culture. Yes, that is why when we are going to clean such a massive river system, it has to be a multi-sectoral, multi-dimensional and multi-stakeholder approach. Now, pause a little and think about these keywords. So these keywords are derived from the government documents. That tells us as aspirants that we have to use such language in our answers. And if we cannot create such keywords, what we can do is we can replicate, right? Then again look at the keyword. So interministerial and center-state coordination. Now, in our polity discussions, have we not studied the federal structure? So while we need to coordinate, we need coordination between center and state. We also need coordination between state and state. We also need coordination between district and district, between subdivision and subdivision. Why? Because it is a multi-state river. And even in a multi-state river, not all the districts of a particular state is drained by Ganga. So at the local level, who needs to coordinate? It is the administration at the local level who need to coordinate with the next state, because it is like Ganga will not have any state borders, right? So it has to be both interstate as well as intrastate as well as between state and state. You have to go for coordination along with center state. Right. Then there are two layers of the Namami Gange project. One is the entry level activities and the medium term activity. So the idea is that we must have some low hanging fruits. So low hanging fruits are basically your entry level activities. So when we are talking about river surface cleaning, and please appreciate that we are coordinating and a lot of countries are helping us. Partner countries like Germany, UK, US, they are helping us. Countries who have been successful in cleaning their own rivers. So if London cleaned their Thames, so they can aid us in terms of technology, in terms of their experience, right? And they can also give us some boats, some technology which can help in cleaning up the process, expediting the process, to ensure ecological flow, to ensure a viral flow, to ensure that there is rejuvenation of biodiversity and the water is clean not only to look at it, but also for drinking purposes, right? So river surface cleaning, then rural sanitation. When we are talking about sanitation and we are talking about toilets, are we not referring to basically the Swachh Bharat mission? That simply means that multiple policies are merging here. So under Swachh Bharat mission, what we'll do, we'll basically create these independent toilets. And we'll go for ODF free status, ODF plus plus. Right? That is the idea. Because if let's say there are villages around Yamuna, there are villages around Ganga, they need to be open defecation free. Because when we discuss pollution, it can be point source and it can be non-point source. Point sources I can very easily identify. Why? Let's say there is an industry and this industry is coming out with liquid effluents. So I can go and ask them that you have to purify this, you have to treat this and then release it. And including the temperature also, you cannot release hot water even if it is clean. Why? Because it affects the ecosystem. So point sources are easy to identify, but what about non-point sources? And we must also appreciate that the life and livelihood of this entire community is dependent on the Gangetic economy. How come? So let's say I'm taking up some horticulture crops. Let's say I'm taking up some cereals. I'm dependent on the Gangetic water. I'm not getting any irrigation because this is Bahufasli Zameen. So multiple crops across the year. And it is naturally wet because of the Ganga. Now what happens if the water is polluted? What will happen? What will happen to the fruits? What will happen to the veggies that are grown? So there will be bioaccumulation, biomagnification. So do we want that? Absolutely not. Right? Why? Because it will affect the health of the humans as well as the children. And that is why we have to look at the entire community. That is why open defecation free and a piped drinking water to every home. That is the entire multi-sectoral approach. Then crematorium. So what kind of activities are being taken up in and around Ganga? So we have crematoriums, we have dhobi ghats. Then we have religious processions. Then we have tanneries also in Kanpur. So all these activities collaborate to give more pollution, liquid, solid, waste, effluents to Ganga. So all these activities have to be targeted. Then in the medium term, what we'll do? So we'll look at market for treated water. So water treatment is must. And for that we need to create STPs, sewage treatment plants. And these STPs can be taken up in PPP model. PPP model with hybrid annuity. And we have to create these STPs for these highly populated cities around Ganga. Let's say Banaras, Kanpur or Allahabad for that matter. Then we also need to look at the municipal and industrial pollution. And the best example is tanneries of Kanpur, the leather industry of Kanpur. Now, let's look at the components. So STPs are there. STPs help to bring the water back. That is basically circular use of waste. And that is the idea of waste to wealth. So first, use STPs to treat the water, then release the water. Or can we use this grey water for some industrial activity? Let's say some cooling plants, right? Then for industrial pollution, the idea is zero liquid discharge and real-time monitoring of effluents. So real-time monitoring with zero liquid discharge is what is required for industrial pollution. Then if this is Ganga, then this entire region is now being taken up as a place of organic farming under the Paramparagat Krishi Vikas Yojana. Furthermore, we are conserving the key species like golden mahasir, Gangetic dolphin, gharials and turtles. And these turtles which were in news are basically helpful in terms of because they consume both your flowers as well as parts of dead bodies. So they basically help in cleaning the river. Further, afforestation of 30,000 hectares. And our Forest Research Institute of India, basically situated in Dehradun, is working on this project. Finally, we have created a Clean Ganga Fund also, where you can contribute, and the total allocated budget for the Namami Gange project is 20,000 crores. and this is 4 times the previous allocated budget. Finally, we have to also go for riverfront and ghat development. Why? Because while we are cleaning up Ganga, we also need to double the farm income and look at improving the quality of life and also connecting Indians and the world to the spirituality of Ganga and the entire Gangetic region. And that is why you'll see that the Prime Minister will take dignitaries to Ganga Aarti, right? What is the way forward? So, Ganga is not only a national heritage, but it is a global heritage and is part of India's civilizational history. And therefore, it is part of India's social and cultural rubric, and it can become a role model for India and the world. Its conservation can become a role model for India and the world. Then it will become the biggest river rejuvenation project of the world. Now, let's look at the third article. So, PAU, Punjab Agriculture University, has developed a new wheat variety that keeps blood sugar and obesity in check. Now, PAU was also responsible for your green revolution. So, it worked on the core areas of wheat. And where do we see wheat-based green revolution? We see this in Punjab, Haryana and Western Uttar Pradesh. Now, over the period of time, we have become food sufficient. We have become food surplus also, and we have a robust structure of PDS system under the National Food Security Act. However, the Global Hunger Index ranks us at a 101 out of 116 countries. That begs the question, why is it so? So when we look at nutrition per se, then we have to look at two aspects, the macronutrition and the other is micronutrition. So we are doing well in terms of macros, but in terms of micro, our allocation is poor. So let's say I am taking good amount of rice and wheat, but I am avoiding, let's say, veggies, vegetables, fruits, nuts, essential oils. I am not taking at all. So what will happen? Some systemic deficiencies will be available. Then let's say I have deficiency of iron, so I'll have anemia. Right? So all those things are happening. Furthermore, with changing lifestyle, we are looking at lifestyle diseases like obesity, like heart-oriented cardiovascular attacks. So these aspects are changing, and that is why our macro topic is food security, but gradually we are moving towards nutritional security. As we mature in terms of our food security, we have to also ensure our micronutrient deficiencies and how can we plug the gaps. Now, what is the framework right now? So the framework currently includes the FCI, which is responsible for procurement. So along with FCI, the states will also procure grains. Then it will be distributed via the PDS network. And basically this is under the National Food Security Act. And the NFSA gives you a right. It is a right-based approach which gives you 75% of the rural population and 50% of the urban population with the food security. But we are only restricting ourselves to macro food security. Furthermore, in this aspect also we have some challenges. Challenges like deteriorating soil health. Why? Because of soil exhaustion. Why? Because we have been monocropping. We are not diversifying. We have isolated some species, some plants, some crops, and we are focusing on that. And we have ignored pulses, we have ignored vegetables, we have ignored our fruits. And our focus is only MSP driven crops. And there too, the infrastructure that is available for wheat and rice is the best, and that is why we have created something called as a rice wheat system. Rice wheat system. And this rice wheat system is also called the food crop centric approach of Indian agriculture or calorie centric nature. And this is one of the reasons for our micronutrient deficiencies. Why? Because if I'm creating a lot of wheat, lot of rice, I'm creating the entire supply chain. So the availability of these crops will be more. But if I go out to find pulses, or if there is some inflationary pressures, what happens? The first cut is on pulses. So I would rather get my rice and wheat very easily or at cheap prices through PDS, but I'm not getting, let's say, pulses. And then nutri cereals like millets were completely ignored. Why? Because MSP focused more towards the rice and wheat system, and this must be seen in the context of food security, which became the burning issue in 1960s, and that is why we went for the green revolution. Now, why nutrition security? Because we are facing a lot of challenges in the form of anemia. So more than 50% of women in India have anemia, then wasting. So 4.5 crore children are basically underweight. So wasting is basically when you have low weight, and stunting is basically when you have low height. So 15 crore and 4.5 crore children are basically affected. Then simultaneously lifestyle oriented diseases and obesity issues. So malnutrition doesn't mean that I am only having less food. It can also mean that I am obese. Now, what are the solutions? So solutions comes in the form of policies. So first is the midday meal. This is basically to give hot cooked meal to the children who are attending schools. Then we have the Poshan Abhiyan. Then we are also going for Poshan Vatikas, basically going for cultivation of some vegetables for the consumption of children themselves in the schools. So in the premises of the school, we'll create small gardens. These gardens can help us get some vegetables which can be aided in the midday meal itself. Then food fortification. Let's say I am adding vitamin A and iron in wheat and I'm creating a fortified food. So government is looking at food fortification under the PDS scheme itself. Then diversification of food. And we have seen states like Tamil Nadu and Chhattisgarh experimenting with, let's say, milk, eggs in the midday meal for nutritional security, for better nutrition of the children. Then Delhi was looking at home delivery. And if we combine both of these, the e-commerce model and the home delivery idea, the idea is that if today we order something, let's say on Swiggy, on Zomato, it is delivered in, let's say, half an hour. If we go for some Instamart kind of app, will take 10 minutes, 15 minutes at max. If we use, let's say, Flipkart or Amazon, it takes, let's say, 1 day, 2 days, or maximum 7 days. So if I can get 5 pence delivered to my doorstep, why can't I get the food grains delivered at my doorstep, which are packed, sealed, and which are not tampered with? So the grain quality will also remain. And if there is any malpractice, then I can also challenge it the way we do it in case of e-commerce. So there is some part of, there is some need of innovation in this entire process that we can learn from the e-commerce model, the best practices from the e-commerce model. Then Aadhaar seeding of ration cards so that it can be better targeted, and in cases where we are not able to provide the subsidy, then direct benefit transfers. Now let's look at a holistic conclusion. So it can be, overall the goal is to ensure adequate food availability, accessibility and affordability, and these are the keywords that makes a good answer as well, right? So availability, accessibility, affordability, while focusing on provision of necessary nutrition or nutrients. So food security as well as nutritional security as well as water security. All of these securities are essential for sustainability and good quality of life. Now let's look at global tropical primary forest cover continued to decline unabated in 2022. Why this is important? This is important because we have seen that climate change is usually in the news, and we can get some case studies out of these discussions. So where can we see the tropical rainforest? So in and around, let's say, Brazil, then along Congo Basin, then entire Southeast Asia, let's say Indonesia, Malaysia, Borneo, right? All those areas we can find the tropical rainforest. Why tropical rainforest? Because they are basically the lungs of the earth. And what do we mean by these tropical rainforests? So basically found in the equatorial region, and they are extremely dense. They are extremely dense. Furthermore, they are also primary forest. Now, what is primary forest? So primary forests are basically created ecologically. They are natural ecosystems and they have not been tampered with. They were created originally in nature. It might happen that the entire forest had burnt, let's say 500 years ago, but then it rejuvenated. So human impact or human interface is minimum in these areas. So even after there is fire, they might have rejuvenated. But now what happens is, and here also you can take this example, that what happens is that let's say from a barren land, it takes 100 years to rejuvenate an ecosystem. But what are we doing? We are compressing nature. We are cutting the forest at this stage only. Let's say we are cutting all the forest at 50 years only. So what will happen? We are basically compressing the time that nature gets to rejuvenate itself, right? To complete its ecological succession and to reach its true climax. Now, let's look at Amazon. So what is happening in Amazon? And I must look at, this is the region of Amazon rainforest, and the entire Amazon river system and the Amazon rainforest are natural heritages of the world, and they are lungs of the earth. And what is happening here? That multiple human activities has led to deforestation and degradation. What is, let's say, oil drilling. So we know that the Brazilian economy is heavily dependent on oil. Then gold mining. There is gold rush right now also, illegal gold mining in this region. Then drugs, naturally because of Venezuela, Colombia, and this is part of the drug route. The drugs which are basically in demand in Europe and North America. Then we are looking at rubber cultivation, we are looking at cattle ranching. Let's look at soy. So soy is cultivated in this region and then it is fed to the pigs in the ranches, to the cattle in the ranches, and the cattle and the pigs will be then slaughtered, and then the meat will be processed so that the America can have its breakfast. So while the demand is in North America, the deforestation happens in Amazon. So can I say that the breakfast of America is more important than the lungs of earth? So this is a case study that you can use at any point of time. Second case study is about Congo Basin. So DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo, is facing two types of existential crisis. One is regarding its conflict. Second is regarding its minerals. So the story is same. Cocoa plantation, rubber plantation. But over the period of time, with conflict, what are we seeing? We are seeing that the EV revolution of Tesla, the EV revolution of China will be dependent on countries like Congo. Why? Because this is a good source for rare earth minerals, critical minerals, minerals like cobalt, copper, etc. So what is happening? That militias are there, then illegal mining is there, then modern forms of slavery is also being practiced, where people are mining with their bare hands. And these images are extremely explicit. And this is available for the world to see, that the basically EV transition of the world is happening at the expense of the rainforest of Congo. Now, let's look at bad loans. So bad loans at record low, but write-offs still in the mix. What is the context? So in 2019, the NPAs was as high as 9.2. And how did this happen? Is the RBI governor started cleaning up the books. So RBI governor wanted every bank to declare its NPAs. and declare its true financial health. So since 2016, this process was going on, and the NPAs increased to the level of 9.2%. But right now, it is at 1%. Now, the author explains what is the reason behind this decrease in NPA. So basically, we must also appreciate what is NPA. So it is a non-performing asset. So the moment I stop paying my installments and there is a 90-day delay in my loan, so what happens? It is categorized as a NPA. Now, what are the reasons? So the primary reason is insolvency and bankruptcy code. So India faced the issue of easy entry but difficult exit. So IBC plugged this gap, the legal gap. So now companies can be created and there can be exit of insolvent companies. Or let's say I have taken up a loan of 8,000 crores, I am not able to repay. Then I can very well go for insolvency proceedings and someone can buy my company. And then the person who buys the company will also repay my debts. Then there has been significant recovery of bad loans over the period of time. Further, the most important reason is that after we saw a lot of NPAs, banks, including private sector banks, they stopped lending to industries. So giving smaller loans to industries and avoiding industrial loans. And that is why you would see that a lot of industrialists during this time was taking up or raising funds from sovereign wealth funds and going to Singapore and Dubai to raise these funds. Then the focus was on retail sectors and personal loans. And what happened is, even during COVID, they did not go wrong. So retail sector and personal sector, they repaid their debts, and furthermore, the interest provisions was as high as 12 to 16%, rather than the smaller interest that they earn on when they loan to conglomerates. Then the idea is to keep a balanced, healthy sheet, and there was bigger provisions made during COVID. Provisions is any money that you keep outside of your profit, so that if you have any losses, you can write it off. So healthy balance sheet has been considered by the entire private sector and the public sector banks. So a lot of cleanup has happened with the help of the regulation of RBI and bigger provisions for writing off the loans which went bad. Now, what can be a conclusion? So we can derive from this discussion that the moratoriums during COVID did not actually increase the NPAs. So there were a lot of articles written at that point of time that these moratoriums can basically cripple some of the banks, and it can also have a tumultuous effect for the entire financial systems. So that has turned out to be wrong. Secondly, RBI has proved again that it is a very good regulator of the financial sector, including both public and private sector banks. Furthermore, we must also look at the big ticket amalgamations. We discussed in last analyst that HDFC and HDFC Bank have just completed their merger. And second bank, IDFC and IDFC Bank, they have announced their merger. And these two mergers must also be seen in light of the merger announced by the government of SBI with its subsidiaries. So now the target is to create big banks which have strong financials, which have clean balance sheets. Why? Because we want to have 5 to 10 banks in the top 50 banks of the world. Thank you so much. Have a nice day.